The Xylorian Empire was known throughout the galaxy for its advanced technology and peaceful diplomacy. Princess Lyra, heir to the throne, had been on a routine mission to solidify alliances when the betrayal occurred. Her once loyal advisors had conspired with a rival faction, leading to an ambush that decimated her convoy. The Loyalists fought bravely, but they were outnumbered and outgunned. In the chaos, Lyra was forced into an escape pod, watching in horror as her ship exploded. As the pod rocketed away from the battlefield, Lyra's mind raced. She had seen the faces of the traitors, heard their cruel laughter as they condemned her people to death. Blood trickled down her forehead from a wound sustained during the escape, and her vision blurred. She activated the autopilot, setting a random course to throw off any pursuers. Exhausted and in pain, she succumbed to unconsciousness as the pod entered the atmosphere of an unknown planet. The descent was brutal. The pod shook violently, its hull glowing red-hot as it tore through the atmosphere. Alarms blared and warning lights flashed, but Lyra remained unconscious, unaware of the perilous journey. The pod crashed into a dense forest, skidding through trees and underbrush before coming to a halt in a clearing. Smoke billowed from the wreckage, and the once pristine escape pod was now a mangled heap of metal. Nearby, a group of deer scattered at the sound of the impact. Birds took flight, and the forest, usually serene, was now a scene of chaos. The crash had not gone unnoticed. Miles away, a human soldier named Jackson Hayes was conducting a routine patrol. Jackson had seen many strange things during his time in the military, but a fireball streaking through the sky was a first. Intrigued and cautious, he radioed in the sighting to his base. "Command, this is Hayes. I've got an unidentified object that just crashed in Sector 7. Permission to investigate?" "Permission granted, Corporal. Proceed with caution," came the reply. Jackson secured his gear and headed towards the crash site on his ATV, his mind racing with possibilities. A meteor, a downed satellite, or something else entirely. As he approached the clearing, the sight of the smoking pod and the unconscious alien inside confirmed his wildest suspicions. Jackson parked his ATV at the edge of the clearing and cautiously approached the wreckage. The air was thick with smoke, and the metallic tang of burning metal stung his nostrils. The escape pod was unlike anything he'd seen before, sleek, with a design that screamed advanced technology. His military training urged him to be cautious, but his curiosity pushed him forward. He peered into the shattered viewport of the pod and saw her. The alien princess, though he didn't know her identity yet, was a sight to behold. Her skin had an ethereal glow, and her long silver hair was matted with blood. Despite her injuries and the alien features, there was an undeniable beauty to her. Jackson's heart pounded. He needed to act fast. He carefully pried open the hatch, the metal groaning in protest. Inside, the pod's control panel sparked and smoked. Jackson quickly assessed Lyra's condition. She was unconscious but breathing. He gently lifted her from the wreckage, surprised at how light she was. He carried her to his ATV, laying her down gently before speeding back towards the base. "Command, this is Hayes. I've got a survivor, alien. She needs medical attention and fast," Jackson reported over the radio. "Roger that, Corporal. Medical team is on standby. Get her here ASAP," the voice crackled back. As Jackson raced back, he couldn't help but glance down at the alien in his care. Who was she? What had happened? He had so many questions, but they would have to wait. Her safety was the priority. Upon reaching the base, the medical team was ready, their faces a mix of awe and professionalism. They worked quickly, stabilizing her condition and treating her wounds. While they worked, Jackson couldn't stay still. He paced outside the infirmary, his mind racing. The implications of an alien crash landing on Earth were enormous. It could mean anything from a peaceful first contact to the harbinger of an invasion. The base commander, Major Davis, approached Jackson with a stern look. "Corporal Hayes, what exactly did you find out there?" Davis asked. Jackson recounted the events, describing the escape pod and its lone occupant. Davis listened intently, nodding occasionally. "We need to be prepared for anything. But for now, you've done well, Hayes. Get some rest. We'll debrief in the morning," Davis said. The door to the infirmary slid open, and Jackson Hayes entered, carrying a tray with food and water. He approached her cautiously, his eyes filled with a mixture of concern and curiosity. Lyra tensed, her fingers instinctively reaching for her wrist where her translator device was embedded. "Hey, it's okay," Jackson said gently, setting the tray on the table beside her bed. "You're safe here." Lyra's fingers activated the translator, a soft chime indicating it was functioning. Who are you?" she asked, her voice tinged with both authority and vulnerability. Jackson took a step back, giving her space. "I'm Corporal Jackson Hayes, a soldier in the Earth Defense Forces. We found you after your pod crashed." Lyra's eyes widened. "Earth? I have heard of it, but I never expected to be here. My ship was attacked. My people, they betrayed me." Jackson listened intently, piecing together her fragmented story. "You're saying your own people did this to you?" Lyra nodded, her expression filled with sorrow. "Yes, a faction within my empire sought power through betrayal. I barely escaped with my life." Jackson's mind raced. The implications of her story were immense. "We need to figure out a way to help you, but first you need to recover." Lyra looked into his eyes, seeing the sincerity there. "Thank you, Jackson. I owe you my life." The door opened again and Major Davis entered, followed by a few scientists and medics. They approached Lyra with cautious respect, understanding the significance of their guest. Davis introduced himself and assured Lyra of their intentions to help her and learn more about her situation. As the scientists began to ask questions, Lyra explained her circumstances in more detail, describing her empire, the betrayal, and the faction led by General Kale. The humans listened with rapt attention, absorbing the information and formulating plans. Jackson remained by her side, offering silent support. Later, as the room cleared and Lyra rested, Jackson pondered the gravity of their first contact. An alien princess on the run, a potential interstellar conflict, and now the responsibility of protecting her rested on his shoulders. He resolved to see it through, no matter the cost. Kale stood aboard his flagship, the Dominator, watching the live feed from his drones. His cold eyes gleamed with malice as he saw the image of Lyra's crash site. "Prepare a landing party," he ordered. "I want the princess alive." His soldiers, elite warriors of the Xylorian Empire, readied their weapons and boarded the sleek black shuttles. They launched from the Dominator, descending towards Earth with precision. Their orders were clear: capture Princess Lyra and eliminate anyone who stood in their way. Back on Earth, Jackson and Major Davis were deep in discussion about the next steps. They knew they had to get Lyra to a secure location where they could plan a counterattack. As they talked, the base's alarms blared, signaling an imminent threat. Jackson grabbed his weapon and rushed towards the source of the disturbance. The first wave of Kale's scouts had landed near the base's perimeter. These scouts, clad in advanced combat suits and armed with plasma rifles, moved swiftly and silently through the forest. Their helmets displayed tactical data, guiding them towards their target. They encountered minimal resistance until they reached the base's outer defenses. Jackson and a squad of soldiers engaged the scouts in a fierce firefight. Plasma bolts sizzled through the air, and the forest lit up with explosions. Jackson's training and combat instincts kicked in as he directed his team, taking down several scouts with precision shots. Despite their advanced technology, the scouts were not invincible. Inside the base, Lyra could hear the sounds of battle growing closer. Fear gripped her heart, but she steeled herself. She was not a helpless damsel. She was a warrior princess of the Xylorian Empire. She found a discarded plasma pistol and held it tightly, ready to fight if necessary. The battle raged on, with Jackson and his team slowly pushing back the scouts. However, more shuttles landed, bringing reinforcements. It became clear that this was not a simple skirmish, but an all-out assault. Jackson knew they couldn't hold out forever. "Major, we need to evacuate the base," Jackson shouted over the comms. "They're here for the princess. We have to get her out now." Davis agreed. "Roger that, Hayes. Get her to the extraction point. We'll cover you." Jackson sprinted back to the infirmary, finding Lyra ready and determined. "We have to move now," he said urgently. Lyra nodded, following him as they navigated through the base's corridors. The sounds of gunfire and explosions grew louder, but Jackson and Lyra moved swiftly, evading the enemy. They reached the extraction point, where a transport vehicle awaited them. Jackson and Lyra navigated through the dense forest, the sounds of distant battle fading behind them. They moved quickly, aware that Kale's forces could be closing in at any moment. Jackson led the way, his military instincts guiding them towards a hidden path he knew would offer some cover. "We need to find a safe place to regroup and plan our next move," Jackson said, glancing back at Lyra. Lyra nodded, her eyes scanning the trees. Despite her fatigue and injuries, she maintained a regal composure. "I trust your judgment, Jackson. Lead the way." As they trekked through the forest, the shadows lengthened and the air grew cooler. Suddenly, Jackson stopped, raising a hand to signal silence. Lyra tensed, following his gaze. Through the underbrush, they could see the glint of metallic armor. Kale's scouts were closing in. Jackson whispered urgently, "We're going to have to fight our way through. Stay close and follow my lead." They crept forward, using the natural cover of the forest to their advantage. Jackson's training kicked in as he assessed the enemy's positions. They were outnumbered, but he had the element of surprise. With a swift motion, he signaled Lyra to take cover behind a large tree. He opened fire, his shots precise and deadly. The first scout went down before they even knew what hit them. The others reacted quickly, returning fire. But Jackson was already on the move. He darted between trees, drawing their attention away from Lyra. Lyra, not content to simply hide, used the plasma pistol she had taken. Her aim was true, and she managed to take down another scout. The fight was intense, the forest echoing with the sounds of gunfire and shouts. Jackson and Lyra fought with determination, their movements synchronized as if they had been fighting together for years. Despite their efforts, more scouts arrived, and it became clear they were being surrounded. Jackson's mind raced, looking for an escape route. He spotted a narrow ravine up ahead, partially hidden by the thick underbrush. It was risky, but it might be their only chance. "Lyra, this way," he shouted, pointing towards the ravine. They sprinted towards it, dodging plasma bolts and leaping over fallen logs. As they reached the edge, Jackson grabbed Lyra's hand and they jumped, sliding down the steep slope into the ravine. The scouts hesitated, unsure whether to follow. Jackson and Lyra used the momentary confusion to their advantage, scrambling through the narrow ravine and putting distance between themselves and their pursuers. The ravine led to a small, concealed cave. Jackson guided Lyra inside, and they collapsed, breathing heavily. "We need to rest here for a moment," Jackson said, his voice hoarse from exertion. "But we can't stay long. They'll keep searching." Lyra nodded, her eyes reflecting both exhaustion and gratitude. "Thank you, Jackson. I would not have survived without you." Jackson gave a small, weary smile. "We're in this together. We'll find a way out." After a brief rest, Jackson and Lyra resumed their journey through the forest, moving with caution and urgency. They needed to find a secure location to regroup and plan their next steps. Jackson knew of a small, off-the-grid cabin a few miles away, owned by a trusted friend and fellow soldier, Captain Sarah Blake. As they approached the cabin, Jackson signaled Lyra to wait while he scouted ahead. The cabin was secluded, surrounded by thick trees, and hidden from prying eyes. Jackson approached cautiously, his weapon ready. He knocked on the door in a distinctive pattern, a code between him and Sarah. The door opened slightly, and Sarah's sharp eyes peered out. "Jackson, what the hell is going on?" Jackson quickly explained the situation, introducing Lyra and summarizing the events that had led them there. Sarah listened, her expression shifting from surprise to determination. "All right, get inside. We don't have much time," she said, opening the door fully. Inside, the cabin was modest but well-equipped. Sarah had always been prepared for emergencies, and this was no exception. She led them to a back room where they could talk more freely. "So you're telling me we have an alien princess here, and hostile forces are on our tail?" Sarah asked, her tone a mix of incredulity and resolve. Lyra stepped forward, her demeanor calm and composed. "Yes, Captain Blake. My name is Lyra, and I am the heir to the Xylorian Empire. My people have betrayed me, and now I seek refuge and allies." Sarah looked at Lyra, her respect growing. "Well, Princess Lyra, you've come to the right place. We'll do everything we can to help you." Jackson and Sarah began to formulate a plan. They needed to contact the remnants of the Xylorian fleet and warn Earth's authorities about the impending threat. The nearest communication outpost was located deep within enemy-controlled territory, but it was their best chance to send a distress signal. As they prepared to move out, Sarah's small but elite team of soldiers arrived at the cabin. They were briefed on the situation and accepted their new mission without hesitation. The team geared up, ready for the dangerous journey ahead. Unbeknownst to them, General Kale had intercepted partial transmissions from Jackson's base and was aware of their location. He dispatched more scouts, determined to capture Lyra and crush any resistance. The group moved out under the cover of night, navigating through the forest with stealth and precision. Jackson and Sarah led the way, their military training and experience invaluable. Lyra's knowledge of her enemy's tactics also proved crucial, allowing them to avoid patrols and ambush points. As they neared the communication outpost, the tension grew. They knew that once they sent the distress signal, their position would be compromised. They had to act quickly and decisively. Reaching the outpost, they found it heavily guarded. Jackson and Sarah devised a plan to infiltrate the facility. Using a combination of diversion tactics and silent takedowns, they managed to breach the perimeter and access the communication equipment. Lyra transmitted a detailed message to the Xylorian loyalists, providing their coordinates and a summary of the situation. She also sent a warning to Earth's authorities, urging them to prepare for the impending invasion. As they finished, alarms blared, and enemy soldiers swarmed the outpost. Jackson, Sarah, and their team fought fiercely, holding off the attackers long enough for the message to be sent. They managed to escape the outpost, but the battle had taken its toll. Injured and exhausted, they regrouped in a nearby safe house. Despite the intense firefight and close calls, their mission was successful. The distress signal was sent, and now they could only hope that help would arrive in time. Jackson and Lyra, their bond stronger than ever, prepared for the next phase of their struggle against General Kale and his forces. Sarah spread out a map on the table, her finger tracing potential routes and strategic points. "We need a plan that keeps us mobile and one step ahead of Kale's forces," she said, her voice steady. Lyra nodded, her mind racing with possibilities. "My people will respond to the distress signal, but it may take time. We must disrupt Kale's operations and buy ourselves as much time as possible." Jackson leaned in, his expression determined. "We need to hit them where it hurts. Supply lines, communication hubs, anything that can slow them down. And we have to stay hidden." Sarah agreed. "There's an old abandoned military base about 50 miles from here. If we can set up there, it could serve as a temporary command center. It's off the grid and has enough resources to sustain us for a while." The team quickly set to work, gathering supplies and preparing for the journey to the abandoned base. They knew the trip would be dangerous, with enemy patrols likely scouring the area. Each member of the team was assigned specific tasks: securing transport, scouting the route, and ensuring they left no trace behind. As they moved out, Lyra walked alongside Jackson, her thoughts heavy. "Jackson, I must thank you again. Your willingness to help, to fight for a cause that is not your own, means more than you know." Jackson glanced at her, his expression softening. "We're in this together, Lyra. Your fight is our fight now. And besides, Kale threatens more than just your empire. If he succeeds, Earth could be next." Their journey was fraught with tension, but they managed to evade several enemy patrols thanks to Sarah's meticulous planning and the team's disciplined execution. They reached the abandoned base just before dawn and quickly set up a perimeter. The base was old but functional. They powered up the main systems, securing the entrances and setting up surveillance. It wasn't much, but it provided a temporary safe haven where they could regroup and plan their next moves. With the base secure, the team gathered in the main control room to finalize their strategy. Sarah brought up schematics of Kale's known facilities, highlighting key targets that could cripple his operations. "We've identified a primary communication hub and several supply depots," Sarah began. "Taking these out will disrupt his ability to coordinate and resupply his forces." Jackson studied the map. We'll need to divide into smaller units to hit multiple targets simultaneously. Speed and precision are crucial. Lyra, her royal bearing unmistakable even in the face of such dire circumstances, added, "We must also consider any intel we can gather on Kale's plans. Capturing enemy officers or accessing their data could provide us with invaluable information." The team split into two groups. Jackson led the first group, tasked with infiltrating the communication hub. Sarah took command of the second, aiming to sabotage the supply depots. Lyra, despite Jackson's concern for her safety, insisted on joining Jackson's team. As night fell, they moved out, cloaked in darkness. The communication hub was heavily guarded, but Jackson's group had the element of surprise. They approached from the south, using the terrain to their advantage. Jackson and Lyra moved silently, taking down sentries with swift, calculated precision. Reaching the outer fence, Jackson cut through the wire, allowing the team to slip inside. They navigated the facility with practiced ease, neutralizing guards and avoiding surveillance cameras. Lyra's knowledge of her people's technology proved invaluable as she disabled alarms and bypassed security protocols. Inside the control room, they accessed the mainframe. Lyra downloaded critical data while Jackson and the others set charges to destroy the facility. Just as they were about to leave, an unexpected complication arose. A high-ranking officer entered the room, flanked by guards. A tense standoff ensued. Jackson, his weapon trained on the officer, demanded information. The officer, recognizing Lyra, sneered but provided crucial details about Kale's plans in a bid to save his own life. They learned that Kale was planning a massive assault on several key locations, including their temporary base. With the intel secured and the charges set, the team made their escape. The facility exploded behind them, a fiery signal of their success. They regrouped with Sarah's team, who had also completed their mission, and returned to the abandoned base. Back at the base, they reviewed the gathered data. The information confirmed Kale's strategy and revealed weaknesses in his forces. With this knowledge, they could plan their next moves more effectively. Jackson and Lyra stood together, looking over the maps and data. "We've bought ourselves some time," Jackson said. "But Kale won't stop. We need to stay ahead of him." Lyra nodded, her resolve unwavering. "We will. And with this information, we can turn the tide. Together, we will defeat him." However, their optimism was short-lived. Unbeknownst to them, one of Sarah's soldiers, Private Liam Matthews, had been compromised. Greed and fear had driven him to secretly communicate with Kale's forces, providing them with critical information about the team's movements and plans. Matthews had been promised safety and wealth in exchange for his betrayal. That evening, as the team prepared for a critical mission to strike another one of Kale's key supply depots, Matthews saw his chance. He discreetly slipped away from the group, his heart pounding with a mix of anxiety and anticipation. He activated a hidden communicator and sent a signal to Kale's forces, revealing their location and the planned strike. Back in the control room, Jackson and Sarah noticed Matthews' absence. "Where's Matthews?" Sarah asked, her eyes narrowing. Jackson frowned. "He was here a moment ago. We need to find him." Before they could initiate a search, the base's alarms blared, signaling an imminent attack. They barely had time to react before Kale's forces, informed by Matthews, launched a surprise assault. Plasma bolts and explosions rocked the base as soldiers scrambled to defend their position. Jackson quickly assessed the situation. "We've been betrayed," he shouted over the noise. "Everyone, defensive positions." Lyra, despite her shock, drew her weapon and prepared to fight. The team moved with practiced efficiency, but the enemy had the upper hand. They had been caught off guard, and the situation was dire. In the chaos, Jackson spotted Matthews trying to slip away, a look of guilt and fear on his face. "Matthews, stop!" Jackson yelled, but the traitor ignored him and disappeared into the fray. The battle was intense. Jackson, Sarah, Lyra, and the rest of the team fought valiantly, but the enemy forces were overwhelming. Casualties mounted, and it became clear that they couldn't hold the base. Jackson made a quick decision. "Fall back," he commanded. "We need to regroup and get out of here." The team retreated, covering each other as they made their way to the escape route. Lyra stayed close to Jackson, her resolve unshaken despite the dire circumstances. As they fled the base, Jackson caught a glimpse of Matthews being cornered by enemy soldiers. Cale's promise had been a lie. The traitor was expendable. Matthews' fate was sealed as he was gunned down by the very forces he had aided. Finally, the team reached their escape vehicles and sped away, the base now a smoldering ruin behind them. They had lost their stronghold and several good soldiers, but they had survived. Jackson's mind raced with thoughts of their next move, but for now, they needed to find safety and regroup. Jackson, Lyra, Sarah, and the remaining members of the team gathered around a holographic map in the bunker's main chamber. The mood was tense, but focused. "We've got one chance to end this," Jackson said, pointing to the map. Cale's flagship, the Dominator, is the command center for his entire operation. If we can take it out, we can cripple his forces and turn the tide. Sarah nodded. "It won't be easy. The Dominator is heavily guarded, and we'll have to infiltrate it from the inside." Lyra stepped forward, her eyes fierce with determination. "We'll use the chaos to our advantage. A small elite team can infiltrate the Dominator and disable its main systems. Without command, Cale's forces will be vulnerable." The plan was risky, but it was their only option. They divided into two teams, one to create a diversion by attacking key enemy positions on the ground, and the other, led by Jackson, Lyra, and Sarah, to infiltrate the Dominator. As they prepared for the mission, Jackson took a moment with Lyra. "We're up against incredible odds," he said, his voice low but resolute. Lyra met his gaze, her expression softening. "We've faced worse and survived. Together, we can do this." The teams moved out under the cover of darkness. The diversion team launched a series of coordinated attacks, drawing Cale's forces away from the Dominator. Explosions and firefights erupted across the battlefield, creating the chaos needed for Jackson's team to approach the flagship. Using a stolen enemy shuttle, Jackson, Lyra, Sarah, and a select group of soldiers boarded the Dominator. Inside, the corridors were labyrinthine and heavily patrolled. They moved swiftly and silently, neutralizing guards and avoiding detection. Lyra's knowledge of her people's technology and the ship's layout was invaluable. They reached the central command center, where Cale was directing his forces. Jackson and Sarah positioned charges to disable the ship's power systems, while Lyra hacked into the mainframe to disrupt communications. As they worked, Cale discovered their presence. He stormed into the command center, flanked by elite guards. A fierce battle ensued, plasma bolts flying and hand-to-hand combat breaking out. Jackson and Cale faced off, their fight brutal and intense. Meanwhile, Lyra and Sarah completed their tasks, setting the charges and disabling the systems. With a final powerful blow, Jackson managed to overpower Cale, leaving the general defeated and incapacitated. "Time to go!" Lyra shouted, as alarms blared throughout the ship. The team raced through the corridors, fighting off remaining guards and heading towards the shuttle. They barely made it out as the charges detonated, causing catastrophic damage to the Dominator. From the safety of their shuttle, they watched as the massive flagship was engulfed in flames and began to break apart. Cale's forces, now leaderless and disoriented, were quickly overwhelmed by the combined efforts of the human and Xylorian loyalist forces arriving in response to the distress signal. With Cale defeated and his fleet in disarray, the tide had turned. Jackson and Lyra, side by side, looked out at the now victorious battlefield, their bond stronger than ever. They had survived the final stand and, together, had forged a new path forward for both their worlds. Lyra took command of the loyalist flagship, the Radiant Star, her presence inspiring hope and determination among her people. Jackson and Sarah joined her on the bridge, overseeing the coordination between the Earth Defense Forces and the Xylorian loyalists. As the Allied fleet approached the battlefield, Cale's remaining ships regrouped, forming a defensive line. The space around them lit up with the glow of engines and weapon systems as both sides prepared for the clash. Lyra addressed the combined fleet, her voice echoing through the communication channels. "This is Princess Lyra of the Xylorian Empire. We fight today not just for our survival, but for the future of our worlds. Together we will end this threat and bring peace to our galaxy, for Xyloria, for Earth." The fleet responded with a unified cheer, and the battle began. The Allied ships surged forward, weapons blazing. The initial volleys were exchanged, with bright beams of energy and missile trails crisscrossing the void. Explosions erupted as ships were hit, debris scattering through space. Jackson, with his military expertise, coordinated the Earth Defense Force's maneuvers, guiding them to exploit weaknesses in the enemy formation. Sarah led a squadron of fighter pilots, weaving through the chaos and targeting enemy frigates and destroyers. Lyra focused on strategic command, directing the Loyalist ships with precision and grace. The Radiant Star engaged in a fierce duel with one of the enemy's remaining capital ships. The battle was intense, with both sides sustaining heavy damage. Lyra's resolve never wavered as she commanded her crew, issuing orders to maximize their firepower while minimizing their exposure. On the bridge, Jackson and Sarah provided critical support, analyzing enemy tactics, and advising Lyra on the best course of action. The teamwork between the humans and Xylorians was seamless, a testament to the bond they had forged through their shared struggles. As the battle raged on, the tide began to turn in favor of the Allied fleet. The combined firepower and strategic acumen of Jackson, Lyra, and Sarah proved too much for the disorganized enemy forces. One by one, Kale's ships were disabled or destroyed, their wreckage drifting through space. Finally, the last of Kale's warships was cornered and forced to surrender. The battlefield fell silent, the once fierce conflict now a scene of triumphant victory. Cheers erupted across the communication channels as the realization of their success sank in. They had won, and Kale's threat was no more. The Allied forces quickly devised a plan to capture Kale. Lyra, Jackson, and Sarah led a small elite strike team to the moon's surface, determined to end the threat once and for all. They landed under the cover of darkness, moving swiftly and silently through the rugged terrain towards Kale's hidden base. The base was heavily fortified, but the element of surprise was on their side. Jackson led the assault, his tactical expertise guiding the team through the enemy defenses. They moved with precision, neutralizing guards and disabling security systems. The closer they got to Kale's command center, the more intense the resistance became. Inside the base, Kale paced angrily, aware that his defeat was imminent. He had underestimated the determination and resilience of his enemies, and now he was cornered. The walls of his command center shook with the sounds of battle as the strike team breached the perimeter. Jackson and Lyra stormed into the command center, weapons ready. Kale, flanked by his elite guards, turned to face them, a sneer on his lips. "So, the princess and her human pet have come to finish what they started," he taunted. Lyra's eyes blazed with fury. "Your reign of terror ends now, Kale. Surrender, and you might live to see a trial." Kale laughed, a harsh, bitter sound. "I'd rather die than be judged by the likes of you." A fierce battle erupted in the command center. Jackson and Lyra fought side by side, their movements synchronized and deadly. Sarah and the rest of the team engaged Kale's guards, ensuring that no reinforcements could interfere. The clash was brutal, the room filled with the sounds of blaster fire and clashing weapons. Jackson faced Kale directly, their fight a culmination of all the battles that had come before. Kale was a formidable opponent, but Jackson's determination and skill proved superior. With a final powerful strike, Jackson disarmed Kale and knocked him to the ground. Breathing heavily, Jackson stood over the defeated general. "It's over, Kale." Kale glared up at him, defiant to the end. "You may have won this battle, but the war is far from over. Others will rise in my place." Lyra stepped forward, her expression resolute. "Then we'll be ready for them. But your time is done." With Kale captured, the Allied forces secured the base and rounded up the remaining enemy soldiers. The general was placed in custody to be tried for his crimes against both the Xylorian Empire and Earth. The victory was complete, but the road to peace and rebuilding was just beginning. The Allied fleet, comprised of both Earth and Xylorian ships, began the process of securing the area and providing aid to those affected by the conflict. Medical teams worked tirelessly to treat the wounded, while engineers and technicians repaired damaged ships and infrastructure. Jackson, Lyra, and Sarah returned to the Radiant Star, which had become a symbol of their alliance and resilience. The ship's bridge was a hub of activity as they coordinated the relief efforts. Lyra, now recognized not only as a princess but as a true leader, addressed her people and the human allies. Today we stand united, stronger than ever. We have faced a great evil and emerged victorious, but our work is not done. We must rebuild, not just our homes and ships, but the trust and unity between our worlds. Together, we will create a future where such threats can never arise again. Her words were met with applause and cheers, a testament to the hope she inspired. Meanwhile, General Kale was taken to a secure facility where he awaited trial. The trial was to be held jointly by the Xylorian Empire and Earth, symbolizing their newfound alliance. The proceedings would be transparent, ensuring justice was served and the truth of Kale's crimes was revealed to all. Jackson and Lyra found a moment of quiet amid the chaos. They stood on the observation deck of the Radiant Star, looking out at the stars. The bond they had forged through their trials was unbreakable. "We've come a long way," Jackson said, his voice filled with a mix of exhaustion and relief. Lyra nodded, her eyes reflecting the starlight. "Yes, we have, and we still have a long way to go, but with allies like you, I know we can face whatever comes next." Their moment was interrupted by a call from Sarah. "We've got a transmission from Earth. They want to discuss the next steps for our alliance." Jackson smiled. "Duty calls, let's go." Lyra and Jackson stood side by side, presenting a united front. They proposed a series of measures, including joint military exercises, shared technological advancements, and the establishment of a permanent diplomatic council. The goal was clear: to ensure peace and mutual prosperity. The Earth delegation, led by President Mitchell, was impressed by Lyra's leadership and the bravery shown by all during the conflict. "We have witnessed firsthand the strength and resilience of the Xylorian people," Mitchell said. "It is clear that together we can achieve great things. Let this be the start of a lasting partnership." The agreement was formalized in a grand ceremony aboard the Radiant Star, with representatives from both worlds signing the treaty. The event was broadcast across the galaxy, a symbol of hope and unity. Jackson, Lyra, and Sarah watched as their dream of a new alliance became reality. In the days that followed, joint task forces were established to address the immediate challenges of rebuilding. Earth sent resources and personnel to assist the Xylorians, while Xylorian scientists shared their advanced technologies with humanity. The collaboration was unprecedented, and the results were transformative. Lyra was officially crowned Empress of the Xylorian Empire in a ceremony attended by dignitaries from both worlds. Jackson stood beside her, not just as a protector, but as a trusted advisor and friend. His role was formalized as the liaison between Earth and the Xylorian Empire, a testament to the trust and respect he had earned. As Empress, Lyra initiated numerous reforms to ensure her empire's stability and growth. She focused on healing the divisions caused by Kale's betrayal and fostering a culture of openness and cooperation. Her leadership, supported by Jackson and Sarah, brought about significant changes that strengthened the empire and its alliance with Earth. In the months that followed, exploration missions were launched, seeking new allies and resources to further bolster their alliance. The joint efforts led to remarkable discoveries, from new habitable planets to advanced alien technologies. The future looked brighter than ever. Jackson, Lyra, and Sarah often reflected on their journey. They had faced incredible challenges and made great sacrifices, but their efforts had paved the way for a new era of peace and prosperity. Their story became a symbol of hope and courage, inspiring others to believe in the power of unity and the strength of the human spirit.